Nathan Gorman versus Daniel Dubois. Now, I, for one, am really surprised this fight is actually taking place. I was one of the cynics that assumed something would happen that prevented, and I suppose technically it still can, but it looks like the fight is very much on. Both fighters are in probably career best shapes, and it's shaping up to be a classic kind of boxer-puncher matchup. And I was just reading an article on Boxing Scene where kind of boxing insiders, I think, are tipping Nathan Gorman to win. Maybe was it 57 or 67% of them said Nathan Gorman would just outbox Dubois and just win. And I can see that. And I've studied these guys quite a lot. I've watched most of, at least all the footage available of these guys, and I've been interested to see how they would progress, but also how they would fare against each other. Now, I've got a couple of thoughts on this. You might not necessarily agree with it. I appreciate these guys, although they aren't mainstream yet, have some pretty hardcore fan bases. Personally, for me, I think Dubois is probably going to take the fight, either on points or maybe even a late stoppage. That's me putting neck on the line, because I could very easily see Nathan Gorman just dancing circles around Dubois for 12 rounds. All right, what I'm saying isn't an absolute foregone conclusion. I think it's the most likely scenario, and I'll tell you why. So, Gorman is obviously the superior boxer. He's surprisingly fluid. He has very fast hands. He throws a lovely left hook, a lovely jab, but surprisingly jab. He counters well. He rolls back, comes back with those left-right hooks. He's a good fighter. He's as far as boxing goes, he's a classic boxer. Moves well when he has to. His biggest flaw, of course, is that he lacks KO power. I think he has 11 KOs on his record, but they're predominantly from kind of TKOs, fighters not answering back. Doesn't have that one-punch knockout power, and any purist outside the sport, you're going to struggle to watch him for 12 rounds, I think, because he's entertaining to watch, and it's remarkable seeing such a big guy move around so fluidly. Of course, he's not anywhere near as tall as Tyson Fury, but he's still entertaining to watch, and his combinations are really quite beautiful. I think he's a little bit heavy to the head. I think he maybe work the body a little bit more. He does throw nice body shot, but I think that his work is predominantly up top, and he starts quite quickly, and then he kind of rolls back into this kind of off-pace, kind of jab, single pot shot, then a combination out of nowhere kind of fighter. And he's clearly very talented, so he does move well. But I just think against someone like Dubois, again, is quite simple in his approach. But what I do think he throws, and I think he might really hurt Nathan with this, is that kind of almost lead left hook to the body. He throws a really nice left hook. And if you see the Kajanu fight with Nathan Gorman, he was caught with that left hook. And sometimes Kajanu is it Kajanu or Kajanu? However you pronounce his name. He was tripling on that left hook sometimes. And Nathan Gorman was either his elbows aren't long enough, or he's just more concerned with keeping his kind of arms and hands up close. So I do think that there's a lot of room for that lead left hook by Dubois to the body, and I do think there's going to be times where we see Gorman on the ropes. Maybe not in the first 1 or 2/3 of the fight, but I do think that you're going to find Gorman pinned on the ropes at some point, with Dubois doing work to that midsection, that exposed midsection. And something else, I think Dubois has a wildly underrated jab. In fact, I would say Dubois' jab might be his best punch in his arsenal. Again, if you watch the Kajanu fight, and these guys have a couple of common opponents, and in both cases, I think Dubois made a much better case for himself than Nathan Gorman did. Obviously, with Kevin Johnson, I thought Dubois, he didn't do an Anthony Joshua, he didn't knock the guy out, but I thought his approach to the fight was exactly as it should be. He started early pressure to try and get the early knockout. It didn't work, and then he just picked his punches, applied pressure when he had to, and didn't take much from Kevin Johnson. I thought he was not necessarily elusive, because he's very little head movement, but he can roll back with punches, and he isn't quite as one-dimensional as I think some people write him off as. Of course, now I've said this, we'll probably see Nathan Gorman, I said, box circles around him and make him look very, very amateur. But I do think that Dubois just has too many advantages in this fight. I think that jab, if he remembers to land the jab or remembers to punch with the jab, follow it up that left hook to the body, I think he's going to find success. He's probably going to have to take a lot more than he can give, but Gorman just doesn't have that kind of power. I think Dubois is going to feel quite comfortable coming forward. I mean, you see in the Gorman and Kevin Johnson fight, Kevin Johnson was walking him down by the end because he had so little concern with what was coming back. And that's going to be a long 12 rounds for Gorman, who has tried and tested at 12 rounds. And Dubois isn't a consistent pressure fighter. He does take breathers. He took breathers in any of his kind of longer distance fights. You can see him kind of stepping off the gas a little bit and punching in spurts. So he's not a relentless pressure. He's not a big baby Miller. He doesn't fight with that relentlessness. And of course, there could be a very good reason as to why Miller was fighting with that relentlessness. We'll never know. Maybe we'll find out in the coming fights. But I do think he's going to be applying enough pressure to make it a very long night for Nathan Gorman, who seemingly will not have the power to stop him. Not to say it's impossible. Cojanu hurt Dubois a couple times. But again, he had the sense to kind of take a step back and, well, then re-immersed himself in the battle. But for me, I think Dubois is going to be a little bit too much. I don't think he's necessarily, like I said, going to throw more punches than Gorman. He might. But I think he's just going to give the impression to the judges that he's doing more, that he's imposing, he's making the fight. And maybe Gorman takes the first third. Maybe he takes the first half. Dubois probably busier in the latter stages. That's how I see it. I said it could be that Gorman just continues that first third success all the way through the fight. Just continues to box, continues to land that jab. 1-2 down the pipe, stepping off. And it might just be rinse and repeat. And maybe Dubois doesn't have anything to break that cycle. But if he does have anything to break it, it's the jab and those body shots that's going to slow Gorman down. And I think up close, you might find that Dubois is just too busy on the inside. Now, of course, again, I remember Ricky Hatton and Mayweather on their fight. They would always said that you'll see Hatton on the inside. Once he gets there, it's his fight to win. And although obviously the referee was very prominent in breaking them up, when they were on the inside, Mayweather fought much better on the inside than I think Hatton expected. And I think that might be the case here. I think Gorman might have a fairly decent inside game, but I do think he carries his hands too high. And I do think there'll be areas for Dubois to work on the inside up close. And I tell you what, Gorman does throw a fantastic uppercut, and I'm sure Dubois is going to have to eat quite a lot of these. But unless he can really kind of thrust in those hips, really get full rotation on those hips, I can't see it deterring Dubois. If anything, it might just galvanize him to throw more. And the thing is, how do you beat a guy that you can't knock out? You know, as longer the fight goes, I think you'll see more inside fighting, and the more there's inside fighting, the more likelihood that Gorman's eventually going to succumb to pressure. But I could be wrong. I'm not entirely certain with this pick, but from what I can see, that for me is the most likely outcome. I'm very excited. I think Gorman's a very special prospect. I just think he lacks knockout power. And, you know, there's nothing to say that he can't catch Dubois with a couple of these uppercuts and then throw in the hooks and the referee calls it off. That's not impossible. But I think it's unlikely that he knocks Dubois out. I think it's more likely that Dubois gets him up against the ropes and eventually knocks him out. Maybe one of those kind of big right hands he throws over the top after kind of working the body, eventually bringing Gorman's arms down. But we'll see. I'm excited. It's July 13th. Make sure you check this out. And I said I haven't done a video on this, but I think that Joyce and Brian Jennings is a very good fight. I would really like to see Joyce against Daniel Dubois. I think for me that would be the ultimate kind of slugfest. A lot of inside fighting. But we'll see what comes out. Maybe Dubois beats Gorman, and maybe we might see Joyce get past Brian Jennings, maybe with a light knockout, but I'm not going to get into that fight now. Maybe they can meet in the future, I'm not sure. Maybe Nathan Gorman just dances around Dubois. We'll have to see. Let me know your thoughts. Take care, and see you next time.